Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Concussion Nerds podcast. And today we are going to talk a little bit about persistent symptoms and a little bit going into this analogy of the battery. This would be actually a really great episode for you to share with loved ones on why things that previously didn't affect you at all now seem so much harder. I kind of a piece of that. But then we're also going to talk about within that, how do we A, recharge our batteries, and B, how do we know how hard to push? So we're going to dip into both of these things a little bit on today's episode. If you are listening to this, and I do know we get the joy of welcoming those of you on a healing journey, as well as clinicians listening to this podcast. So as you're going through, if you like what you hear, if you're interested in learning more from a clinician perspective, particularly clinicians, if you're looking to understand how to apply an integrative rehabilitation approach to helping your clients succeed faster, then in the notes of this podcast episode is a link to invite you to our upcoming masterclass called the Concussion Revolution. And that is exactly what we're going to be doing. So clinicians, if you're looking to dig a little deeper, if you're wanting to learn more about that integrative approach, please do sign up for that masterclass. It is the beginning of February. Okay, here we go. Persistent symptoms and the battery. So I did an Instagram post about this, and I should probably reshare it because it's a really nice way to start to kind of share and have that awareness of why things are kind of so much harder, right? So first of all, let's talk about what's happening in the brain when we have a concussion. So let's just recap here. So say your brain is normally this really efficient, like 4-car highway, like 4-lane each direction highway where information can travel quickly and smoothly from one destination to the other, right? So I always like the highway analogy because you all can imagine what it's like to go on a road trip, for example, right? Or you're trying to drive to work, right? So something you do every day, something that you know takes you 20 minutes from your front door to walking in your office, and you can bank on it, right? You know the route, you know the parking spot, everything. It just goes every day. And then one day there is construction. Okay. So they are changing the water pipes in the block before work. Okay. So you go, you're doing your usual routine, you're traveling your usual route. And then all of a sudden, your path is gone, but you didn't know this was going to happen. Okay. So it's unpredictable. And all of a sudden, the route you would normally take is no longer an option. So they have a detour marked out. And so you follow these detour signs that begin to take you a route you're unfamiliar with. And so now all of a sudden, you have to pay more attention. And then you realize, or you think you realize, that this detour route isn't taking you back towards the destination you want to be. And so now you're trying to find another way to do it. So you plug it into your GPS, and now your GPS gives you another new route, and you reroute again. And then you eventually get to your office, but now your parking spot that you always park in has been taken by someone else. So now you're driving through the parkade to try to find a new parking spot. And by the time you walk in your office door and you sit at your desk and you take a breath, you are exhausted. And you just need to sit to recollect, to reground yourself, to focus your thoughts because of this unpredicted stress in the morning to continue on your day forward. That is a bit of an analogy of what's happening in our brains after concussion and why things that normally take up no energy or minimal energy are all of a sudden taking more. So when we think of the battery, we need to think of a couple things too. So typically, when we are a healthy individual, you go to sleep, you have a good sleep, ideally, and you wake up feeling restored, feeling energized with a full battery. So if you think of the kind of cartoons of like those bars of energy, you're full bars, and they're green because they are like ready to go. Okay. And then you begin on your day. And things like brushing your teeth and packing your lunch and you have music playing and all these things in the house, like those don't deplete your battery at all. You have a shower, you feel good, you feel refreshed, and you like head out your door and your battery is still full. Now, let's say we've had a concussion or you're someone with concussion or you're working with someone with a concussion. And we know, and if you've listened to the sleep podcast with Dr. Shane Criado, that there's a significant percentage of people after TBI that have difficulty with sleep, whether that's falling asleep, staying asleep, getting a restful sleep, hitting all the stages of sleep. Significant number of people after TBI have difficulty with sleep, which means that potentially for you, you go to sleep and you wake up in the morning, but you're not feeling refreshed, right? We didn't hit all the stages of sleep. We only had 1 or 2 sleep cycles as opposed to our desired 4, right? And so you wake up and instead of your battery being full, you're waking up and it's already starting off a bar short. So we're starting with 3 bars instead of 4. Now you need to get up and start your day. So say you're someone who gets up and you still like to have that shower in the morning. And so you get up and you have the shower, but it requires energy. So you think about the analogy we just get with concussion, dependent on your unique presentation and the areas you're having challenge with, a task like having a shower requires a whole bunch of different reroutes, which then depletes that battery faster, right? If you're someone that struggles with vestibular symptoms and or autonomic symptoms and postural changes, right? So moving from sitting to standing or being in standing for a longer period of time is an issue, then standing in a shower is going to be fatiguing, right? If you're somebody that struggles with spatial awareness or just that overall piece, then that's going to be challenging. Now, if you're someone who goes downstairs, right? So now you're already more tired and you go downstairs and say you're someone who has kids or a partner and there's lots of movement happening in the kitchen and people getting ready and there's conversations happening. Well, for someone with a concussion, if there's multiple conversations or excessive stimuli, that's incredibly fatiguing on the brain because the brain is trying to process all this information, but that's what it's struggling with. So now trying to engage in these conversations to help people get ready for the day already brings their battery down more. Right? So when we think of someone who's trying to move on this persistent journey and heal on this persistent journey, if they don't give themselves opportunity to ultimately, like I always say, use your cell phone as an example, like you plug your cell phone in midday to recharge if you've been using it a lot in the morning. If we don't give ourselves potential to recharge our batteries throughout the day, then it's quite likely you're going to be depleted before the end of the day even rolls around. Right? So if we wake up with a TBI and we wake up with less battery power, and then each task we do, not every task, but a lot of the things that you would normally do in life require more battery power than they normally would, you can understand how this battery starts to deplete faster. I just did a consult with someone the other week and we were talking about this because they wake up feeling pretty good in the morning, but by like 12 o'clock every day, the symptoms are starting to come on. And so we had a discussion about what is their morning looking like? What are the tasks they're doing in the morning leading up to that point? And kind of what it came out to is it's this exact scenario. It's tasks that normally would never have depleted or, really notable energy from this person's life, but they were just stacking these tasks on top of each other and literally like fast draining their battery for the day. So by the time 12 o'clock rolled around, symptoms were higher, they were fatigued, they had to go lay down and take a nap for several hours to kind of recharge, and then they could do a bit more in the evening. So ultimately, what we want to try to do is we want to try to have these shorter periods of recharge throughout the day so that we don't reach the point of complete depletion in the middle of your afternoon, because then it's going to be a significantly longer period. So for this person, it was make sure we have like these minute recharge sessions. So before you switch a task, you pause and you like just ground and breathe for 5 minutes, right? Or you palm, or you listen to a meditation, or you go sit in nature, whatever it is for you. So if you haven't listened to the rest episode, pop back and listen to the rest episode. But whatever it is for you that helps you recharge, we're all a little bit different. For me, literally jumping onto a mentorship call with either my concussion mini school crew, which is mini school is for those of you on a concussion journey, or with my concussion nerds crew, which is my clinicians, that's a cup refiller for me. Like that is an energizer for me, right? I can step onto those calls feeling super depleted, and I get on that call and all of a sudden I am like brought to life, and I get off that call and I'm just buzzing and completely re-energized. So what fuels one person may not be the thing that fuels you, right? What recharges me may not be what recharges you. And so it's important that, yes, we can take all these suggestions from everyone else around us about what is rest, what do we do to recharge, what does that look like? But it's super important that you do your own discovery work as well. And if something didn't feel like it really worked, then it's not that it maybe is never going to work for you, but maybe we try to find something else now. And it really is a process of trial and error. Okay. So the battery. It's really important to recognize this, right? People wake up with less of a charged battery, and then because it's more effortful to do the tasks, again, we'll talk about that in a second, because it's more effortful, then the battery depletes. It uses more energy per task, so the battery depletes faster. So I hope that's a helpful analogy. And again, there is an old reel on my Instagram like that talks about this too, so I should probably kind of drag it up and share it for you guys. But it's a powerful kind of thing that people can start to visualize. And especially if you're a loved one listening to this and you're trying to support somebody and you're trying to wrap your head around why someone feels so tired or so symptomatic, this is why. Okay. It's not because they're lazy. It's not because they're unmotivated. It's physically exhausting. So why are things so much harder? Right? Why is that detour there? Right? And I say this all the time, and you're probably sick of listening to it if you've listened to the first 20 episodes of this podcast. But it truly is figuring out what isn't speaking well in your brain. When things don't speak well, when they don't integrate, then the messages get jumbled. Then we need to have a detour, right? If things don't speak well and it's not making sense in the interpretations of our brain, we find a different way to do it. And so this always coming back to that root cause, that root piece of what is the thing or things, because it's not always just one thing, right? What are the things that are the underlying issues that are making it hard for my brain to talk? What is the underlying issue that's challenging my brain to communicate effectively? Right? What part of my brain is injured that needs some like specific, direct love through rehab exercises that will help me get to that next step so it can speak nicer together? And again, because it's what I do and what I preach and what I teach, it's literally having that integrative holistic assessment, right? So it is going back to finding out how each of your systems are working individually. And then how are they speaking together? And if we can figure out what isn't talking well and we can help that, then that's the construction site when we're in our first analogy, right? If we can help that and fix that, then the pipes are fixed, the construction goes away, and the pathways can be resumed. However, you know how when you start to let traffic through after a construction site again, right? So they've done the major fixing. Kind of think of this as recovery. When they have the road closed because they're changing the pipes underground because there's an issue, right? So that would be the injury from the concussion, say, and they have you completely detoured. So now no traffic can go through that area. You've completed a completely different path, a completely different detour to achieve the goal that you initially achieved, but it took that much longer with that many more steps. Now, so you're starting to do work, you're starting to do some rehab, and the next step is, okay, they've been able to repair it a little bit, the road a little bit. So now they're going to let single lane traffic through in a controlled fashion. They might let 10 cars from one side go and then 10 cars from the other side. And it's controlled by a flagger, right? The person with the stop sign that spins it from stop to slow. Side note, this was literally the construction that was happening as I was driving my son to school. And it was pipes and the road was closed. And this is literally what happened. We had to detour. But there was this flagger, and she was the happiest person. She must have freaking loved her job. And literally seeing this flagger could brighten anyone's day if they were frustrated because of this construction. Like, she always had a smile on her face. She would like groove and dance. She must have had headphones in, or she just grooved and danced to the beat of her own drum. But she would smile at you. She'd wave. She'd wink. She like the most happy flagger I've ever met in my life. And it was beautiful because you would get up there. I experienced this when I didn't know the construction was happening. You pull up, and I was frustrated because I was like, crap, I'm on a time frame. I got to get heads into school. I got to get to the clinic. And then there was this flagger in like all her tattooed glory, biggest smile on her face, gave me like the best wave. My window was down and she was like, good morning. And so I said, good morning. And like my mood completely changed. Like, it was so good. Anyways, total sidetrack. So she's the person. Now imagine like if she's your rehab professional, right? If your rehab professional is upbeat and energized and like putting out these awesome vibes, those spill over into you in your rehab as well, right? It was hilarious. We just finished an intensive week, and I love getting to joke with my clients. Like, I love getting to banter back and forth. I love to make rehab fun. I love when we can play and be silly, because we know that we learn things in play faster than not in play. And we were talking about my favorability rating that started really high in the week. I laughed so hard because there's somebody saying, Natasha, your like favorability rating is tanking right now because we made him pretty symptomatic in one of the exercises. But by the end of the week, my favorability rating was back on top. So we're good. But that fun, that banter, that play. And so this flagger is like the therapist in this analogy, right? So when we start having traffic, so construction is you've detoured, and now we have this next step where they're starting to let traffic through. Single lane in a very controlled fashion, like 10 cars at a time. Picture that as you're starting to do specific individualized rehab at the capacity your nervous system can tolerate. Because this construction site, aka your brain, this construction site would crumble, or there would be other car accidents if all of a sudden they open the road and let all the traffic through. There's just no way that road where they're doing this construction could support that. Just like in your brain, as you're starting to reintegrate and do exercises specific to the area that's struggling, you have to do it gradually. You can't just pour everything into it because your brain can't support that. Now, back to our construction site, we have single lane traffic. It's going great. They're continuing to do the work and the construction. Now, all of a sudden, we can start to do more traffic, right? So now more traffic can go through, more intense rehab, more reps, more sets, more exercises targeting an area, to the point where it builds up to then the road reopens and you have double or single, or triple, whatever it is, traffic back and forth, and the flaggers are no longer needed. Which ideally then becomes that spot in rehab where we are being able to do the things we want to do and return to the things in our life that we love. But again, it comes back to, why is the area struggling? And yes, although I don't love, it's like, it just takes time. It does take time. We can't snap our fingers and heal, right? But we can do things to support our recovery and help it move forward within the time, right? So it's not that all you can do is wait. It's not that it just takes time. You need to be patient. It's the, yes, it takes time, and I can do things in that time to help move recovery forward. How much you push in each session I'm going to super high level here. We always talk about this 2 point rule. And I bring the two, I think pretty sure we've talked about the 2 point rule on this podcast before. And it was introduced to me way, way back when by Dr. Shannon McGuire. So she was my first ever, oh my goodness, this was like almost a decade ago, first ever concussion course I ever did. So I always say I had that first client who she sat in front of me and I looked at her and I said, I have no idea what I'm doing. But if you're willing to work with me, I'm willing to try. And I enrolled in a course that next weekend. Shannon's course was that course. And Shannon shared this because an OT on her team had developed it. And it's the 2 point rule, right? So I talk about this in a lot of different ways, but ultimately what it is that when we go in to do an activity, whether it's a rehab activity, a life activity, whatever it is, we need to, yes, challenge our nervous system, but not to the extent of like complete overwhelm and shutdown. Okay. So what that is when we're doing a rehab exercise, if you're a clinician and you're doing a rehab exercise, or if you're someone in doing anything, just do a check-in on where you're at before you start, right? If you're like symptom scale 0 to 10, 10 is non-functional, 0 is you're good to go, like no symptoms, hunky-dory, happy as can be. And so you're at 4, it means we're allowed to push to a 6, right? We're allowed to push to a 6 in this specific moment. And so as we do our rehab exercises or as we do whatever life activity is, if you can stay within that window of a 6 and below, you're good. That is a point of challenging your nervous system a little bit. But then at the end of that, you're going to give yourself a moment of recovery, right? So we always say it's this dance of like challenge, recover, challenge, recover. We are going to be talking about a lot more of this, again, clinicians, because we apply this into rehab all the time. It's incredibly important in rehab. This is one of the pieces on how you get your clients to do those 60-minute sessions, or in my case, 60-minute sessions 3 times a day, 5 days in a row. This is one piece of that, but it's an important piece, right? So this is not the no pain and no gain. This is not, I need to go until I crash. This is, I'm going to challenge myself a little bit, but I'm going to recognize that as I'm reaching that 2-point increase, if I start to get higher than that, I'm going to pause, pull back, and just give myself a period of rest to recover. And then I can go back to the thing, whatever that thing is, right? So knowing that that moment of rest and recovery is also ideally, potentially going to help you recharge your battery so you can keep going. So we've definitely jumped a little. We're 21 episodes in. You're probably used to some of my tangenting at this point. I hope you took some of the golden nuggets from this episode. What I would say, golden nugget number 1 is understanding the battery, right? Understanding that when you're someone with PCS at this point, it's quite possible you're waking up with less than a full battery, but then the demands you put on and the tasks you have to do, not all of them, but some of those tasks are going to drain that battery more than they would normally. And so you need to allow yourself periods of recharge throughout the day. Okay. So the same thing that you might have done before your concussion that took no depletion of energy now, dependent on your underlying causes, may actually drain your battery faster. That's number 1. Number 2, well, what the heck do we do to help our battery not drain faster is, again, connect with someone who can help you do that integrative multi-systems assessment to figure out what's working well in your brain and what's not. Where are the detours happening because things aren't speaking nicely that we're having to use more energy to complete a task? When we figure out that, then we can begin to work on it. Takeaway number 3, when you begin to work on it, you need to be patient, right? This is where it does take time. And I say be patient as in like, I realize that's not always easy because you just want your life back. But this is where it does take time, but we can gradually introduce things like single lane traffic at a time to begin to challenge that part of the brain so that it can heal and be used and recover. Takeaway number 4 is making sure, and that 2-point rule, how hard do you push, right? In a rehab session, in a singular exercise, you're not pushing more than 2 points per exercise. Challenge, recover throughout a rehab session. We will be talking about more of that in the upcoming masterclass. If you're engaged in a life activity, again, ideally, and this, I also recognize that this cannot always be the case, but if possible, implementing that 2-point rule in your life so that whatever activity you're doing increases your symptoms by about 2 points, but then you have a period to recover after. Okay. Woo! I think that about tops it for today, my friends. I hope that you're loving these episodes. I hope that you're getting golden nuggets out of it. I love hearing from you. Please send me a message on Instagram. Let me know your favorite takeaway. Let me know what you'd like to learn and hear about too. This podcast is for you. And again, clinicians, if you haven't already registered for upcoming masterclass, please do. If you are on a journey, please know this masterclass is not for you, but Concussion Mini School, which is my free monthly call for people on a concussion journey, is for you. So if you'd like the link for Mini School, check out below or send me a message on Instagram. Until next week, my friends, have an amazing day. That's today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you liked what you heard, give us a like, give us a share, give us a tag on Instagram, and please never hesitate to reach out. We love communicating and connecting with you. Until next week, my friends, have a marvelous day.